Welcome to Down the Line with Charlie and Bo. I'm Sam Wilson, and today we are at the Gatehouse at the Navy Yard, and we'll be joined by a very familiar face that shares the same passion for baseball as Charlie and Bo on this week's edition of Down the Line. Down the Line is brought to you in part by the Valley Forge Tourism and Convention Board. Visit Montgomery County's main streets. Find out more at makeitmainstreets.com. By Shibe Vintage Sports, where there's a story in every stitch. Check out their throwback sports gear at their Center City location or at shibesports.com. And by Phillies Nation, where informed fans go for news, rumors, events, and other fun stuff.
They're not just familiar faces, they're your friends and neighbors. It's their small businesses, a beating heart that makes a neighborhood a home, where personality is served on a plate and imagination paints a brighter world. A place where fresh is always in stock with a personal touch passed down through generations. Support small and make a big difference. Make it local. Make it Main Street. Make it Montco.
My name is Kenny Thomas, and I'm the chief artist at Shibe Sports. I'm a big Philadelphia sports fan, a 4-for-4 guy.
I learned how to screen print in high school. Started making my own t-shirts at home, slowly grew and grew until I needed to get a studio. My name's Alex, and I print t-shirts for Shibe Sports.
To actually be able to impact a culture with the things you make is one of the most important things an artist can ever do.
Charlie, today we have probably one of the most knowledgeable baseball people, besides you and I, in the Philadelphia area and beyond. And we're talking about Jim Salisbury, who's done it all in baseball, from New England, right?
Correct.
And obviously you love the game of baseball. I know you covered both Charlie and myself, so we won't get into those stories yet. Let's talk a little bit about you. How did you get started, and when did you realize this is what you wanted to do for your career?
You know, Larry, I've always loved the game of baseball. My dad was a high school coach in New England, and my mother was a voracious reader of books and newspapers. So in our house, we had a lot of baseballs, a lot of hockey pucks, and a lot of books and newspapers. So I was surrounded by, baseball and the printed word. So I think it was a natural that I combined those two loves and grew up to be a baseball writer.
Did you ever play baseball or want to be a professional baseball player?
Who didn't? I wanted to be Larry Bowa. My father hit me, ground balls in the street. We'd tape up the ball when it would get beat up by the road, and we'd be out there on a warm day in the winter taking ground balls. But there comes a time in everybody's career where the game tells you you're not good enough anymore. Unfortunately, it told me that right after high school. But being able to get into sports writing and baseball writing in particular, just it gave me an outlet to express my love for the game, and it kept me involved in it, and it's taken me all over the country to every ballpark, and it helped me build relationships with people like you and see great players and appreciate the game and respect the game, and I just feel so lucky to have had such a front row seat to see such greatness. I'm a little biased. I love the game. I think it's the hardest of all games. I think it's the hardest of all games to be good at. And when you get to the big league level and you see those guys every day and they perform year after year after year, you learn what it takes to be that good. You develop that appreciation. So I really feel lucky to have been a kid who grew up loving, I loved the newspaper. The newspaper would come every afternoon. I'd read it on my hands and knees in the living room. Wow. I'd read about the Red Sox. Every Sunday morning we'd get the sporting news, and I'd read about the teams all over the country. It was a different world. There was no ESPN. That's how you kept up with the Cardinals and the Dodgers through the sporting news. And to be able to grow up to combine those two loves, the love of the language and the love of words and the love of baseball, and make it my career, it's been a real blessing.
Yeah. Jim, tell us a little bit about things that sports writers in baseball, they're very connected, and they're connected with some actually decisions being made of like all-star games or anything, MVP.
No question. They, you know, this game is about the players, and it's always about the players, and it's about the game, and it's about the managers and the coaches and the executives, and it's about the fans. But the media, the writers in particular, they have their place, you know, on the totem pole. It's not real high, but it's in there, and there was they're still important, and they were very important 100 years ago when baseball was not a big booming business; it was a small business. They brought the game publicity daily. They fed the fans' interest. They created interest in ball clubs, and the owners understood that. One of the great examples that I think shows how much owners valued the coverage that newspapers and writers would give their teams, and the importance that it brought in connecting with fans, is when the Dodgers moved out west after the 57 season.
Right, yeah.
They knew they needed to connect with their fan base, and they knew newspapers were a big way they could do that. They bought a plane. They bought their team plane, the Dodgers did. And for years, right up into the 80s, any writer who wanted to go on the trip was allowed to have a seat on that airplane.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Because the Dodgers ownership knew how important publicity was, and as a vehicle to promote their team, how important it was for fans to be engaged and be interested in what their team was doing. So they would extend that courtesy to the writers so they could get that publicity. Times have obviously changed now. That doesn't happen anymore. But, you know, like I said, writers have their place, reporters have their place, and they've been very influential over the years. You mentioned the All-Star game. There was a writer from Chicago who basically suggested to Major League Baseball back in the 30s that you need to have an All-Star game and show off your great players every summer. That's how the All-Star game was born, through a suggestion through a sports writer. The Baseball Writers Association, a group that I'm a member of, that I've been a member of for a long time, you know, they started the Cy Young Award. They started the MVP Award. They give those awards, not necessarily Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball doesn't give the Manager of the Year, the Cy Young, the MVP, the Rookie of the Year. The Baseball Writers Association of America gives those awards, and MLB recognizes that. You know, baseball writers were important in the founding of the Hall of Fame. A sports writer came up with the save rule. Another sports writer, a baseball writer, came up with the quality start. So they've had their impact. They've also had some things they're not proud of. I mean, I think baseball writers were not quick enough to maybe recognize the problem that steroids were a generation ago. So, and it's a fair criticism. So they've definitely had their role in the game, the baseball writer in particular.
Let me ask you this: Do you vote for Hall of Fame?
You know, I stopped voting for the Hall of Fame.
Really?
I did for many years, but
on your own, you stopped?
Yes, I did, because of you know, the steroid era. It made me too conflicted about who did it the right way, who did it the wrong way, and I don't want to sit there and pick apart. This guy may have done this guy may have done that. I don't want to act on hearsay. So for me personally, it just made sense to step aside from the voting process.
Well, at least let me ask you this, Joe. You and I talk about this a lot. People try to compare back in the day when we played, or even 15 years ago. And I don't think it's a good comparison now, because the game is, you can verify this, the game's different now. And I don't see how you can compare a home run hitter today with okay, I'll go with Mike Schmidt. Even I'll go as far as Jim Thome. The parks are smaller. Yes. The pitching to me is not as deep. The ones and twos, I agree, and you've said this a lot, Charlie. Right. The ones and twos are ones and twos, but 3, 4, 5. Right. I mean, do you see a difference how you can do that?
Yeah, I think, like you said, the parks are small, those balls are rock hard. The bats are even more advanced. Right. I mean, you guys hit with ash that would actually splinter and chip and get soft. They're using rock hard maple, and these guys train for power year round. So I do think it's a different game. Everybody's swinging for the fence. There was a time when you played. I mean, I remember talking to you about this. You hung your head when you struck out. Right. Strikeouts were embarrassing. Now they're just accepted. So it is a different game. But in some regards, it's not a different game. I still, even though people bash it and it has its flaws, I still love the game. I think it's a great game. But I do agree it's different.
Now Phillies Nation presents Ask a Question.
I'm Marco from Philadelphia. Hey Larry, who's the toughest pitcher you ever faced?
Hey Marco, that's a great question. I faced a lot of tough pitchers in my career, but the one name that stands out above everybody else was Bob Gibson, a tremendous competitor, one of the greatest pitchers that ever played baseball. He played for the St. Louis Cardinals, but on any given night, he was very difficult to hit.
We'll be right back with more from Charlie and Bo. Phillies Nation is your source for breaking news, original analysis, trade insights, and more. With Credentials Access, our team of writers brings you first-hand accounts from your favorite players of today's team, minor league prospects of the future, and Phillies alumni from the past. Join our community and connect with hundreds of thousands of die-hard fans through our social media accounts, tailgate parties, and charity events. Don't miss a thing. Be sure to visit PhilliesNation.com every day.
I'd like to ask you a question about what's the best part of your job?
Charlie, the best part of my job is, I love baseball and I get to be around it every day. There's an old saying about, happy is the man whose job is his hobby. Well, baseball has been a lifelong passion of mine and a hobby of mine, so I get to go watch a baseball game every day and write about it. So that's a great part of the job. What's also great is I get to watch greatness every day. These are the top players in the toughest game under the sun. Watching Utley, Howard Rollins all those years, it was special. But one of the things I love is to as a reporter, is to try to find out what makes a guy tick, what makes a player tick, because I think the human side of you drives you as an athlete as well. That that drive, that determination, that perseverance. I mean, look at you, learn to switch it in AAA in the big leagues. That's really hard to do.
Yeah, it was.
But so I love that part of the game and trying to learn about a player's background. I remember calling up Jimmy Rollins' high school coach once, and you guys will be able to identify with this story. So Jimmy, I think, makes the team as a freshman, but they have an upperclassman at shortstop, so he starts off the year as the third baseman, and he's batting leadoff, and they had a short porch. First game, short porch out in right center, and Jimmy hits a one-hopper to the wall, and the coach is like, wow, it's a base hit, first at bat. And all of a sudden, Jimmy keeps going. He's going to stretch it into a double, and the coach is like, all right, hold up. Jimmy rounds second, comes into third, and a big head first slide. The coach is like, what is he doing? And the coach runs right through the stop sign, and he said, I didn't know whether to yell at him or hug him. And he said, when Jimmy gets up, and he says, you are the fastest little guy I've ever seen in my life. But, I mean, that's Jimmy, right?
Yeah,
running right through a stop sign.
But
I do love knowing what makes a guy tick. I mean, you remember Billy Wagner. I mean, as a kid, breaks his right arm, can't throw. Well, he decided he'd learn to throw left-handed, and he became the hardest throwing left-hander on the planet at one point in his life. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, I love the story behind Milt Thompson. He told me once, as a kid growing up, all he wanted to do was play second base like his idol, Jackie Robinson. And but the Little League coach said, hey, you throw left-handed, I can't put you at second. So Milt went home and told his dad, and his dad said, we'll fix that. And every night for 3 years, they were out in the backyard playing catch, and Milt learned to throw right-handed, became a college second baseman, and oh, by the way, 15 years in the big leagues as an outfielder. That's amazing to me. So I love what drives the person and how that affects the athlete.
Well, you know what, we're talking about looking up stats and everything, and I wanted to Google your name.
Oh, good.
So obviously, I Googled your name, and then it says Baseball Reference, minor leagues, and I went, wait a minute, maybe I missed something. Did Jimmy play in the minor leagues? Is there another Jimmy Salisbury?
In fact, there is, and this guy did play in the minor leagues, and I learned that a long time ago when I was a young writer covering the Pawtucket Red Sox, the Red Sox AAA team. They hired a new manager by the name of Buddy Bailey, and Roanoke, Virginia, right?
He lives in Amherst, Virginia, right across the mountain from my mom.
So I call up old Buddy Bailey. I say, hey, this is Jim Salisbury. I cover the Pawtucket Red Sox. You're going to be managing. And he says, Jim Salisbury? I had a kid by that name pitch for me when I was managing in Durham. And I said, really? He said, yeah, he was a Mormon from out in California. He says, he wasn't very good, but he sure was a nice boy.
Hey, being from New England, who was the guy, obviously you follow the Red Sox.
Right.
Who was your idol that you used to love to watch him play?
Oh, that's easy, Yastrzemski.
Really?
Carl Yastrzemski. I used to imitate him in the backyard, playing wiffle ball, playing whatever. But we had a guy named Davy Lopes. Yeah. And he went to the same high school as my dad. He was a few years younger, but whenever the Dodgers were on TV, in those days you didn't get a lot of West Coast games, but if they're on the game of the week, we were glued to that TV to watch Davey Lopes. And loved Davey Lopes. He was on your staff, and World Series winner, and really transformed that team's base running. But it was a real thrill to get to know Davey because he was one of my favorites.
The greatest base stealing teacher I ever been around, and I was around Maury Wheels, and I've listened and watched Lou Brock. But as far as the teaching part, I think Davey saw stuff that I never saw in a game. Really.
He really helped Victorino, I think, become a real threat on the bases.
Without a doubt. Davey, when we hired Davey, at that time we had about 9 or 10 guys in there, and Davey looked me right in the eye and he said, now, Charlie, because I was on the Dodger team a while, but also I knew him when he played in the minor leagues, and he said, if you hire me, you're going to get mad at me some.
Why is that?
He said, because I want to be in charge of the base running, and I want to be in charge of the base stealing. And he said, sometimes we're probably going to run and we'll get thrown out and you're not going to like it. He told me that, Bo.
Well, he was honest with you.
Yeah. And I thought a minute and I said, I take him, I love him, you know, like that. But before I forget, though, I got a question I want to ask you because I don't know, it kind of bothers me today. I want to know who your favorite manager was.
Well, you always give me trouble. I'm going to give you the political answer on that one. I have really liked every manager I've ever covered, and I've covered some great ones. You know,
you're doing the tightrope.
Yeah, I'm doing the tightrope. I mean, you know, in my job, sometimes you're going to get sideways with people. I mean, if you're not getting under somebody's skin now and then, you're probably not doing your job right.
I agree.
I mean, I remember one day, you know, in Anaheim, you actually, I think, threatened bodily harm on me, but that's fine. I mean, I got thick skin. I was over it the next day. You were over it the next day, and I think you actually, it was pretty
intense.
It was pretty loud. And I remember walking out of the office that day, and John Vukovic is sitting around the corner. He goes, "He got you, didn't he?" He goes, He's told me the whole plane ride out here how he was going to jump you, and he got you.
Yeah. Now I'm going to tell Bo what I think. Okay. You know, when I first became manager here, you know, like and people, you know, like they have second thoughts about me, and things like that. And I think I asked Jimmy one day. I said, and we started talking about the game or something like that, and he brought up. He says, my favorite manager is Terry Francona.
He said that?
Yeah, he said, my favorite manager is Terry Francona.
Oh, so he just banged both of us.
Oh, that's good, and stuff like that. So when he'd come around and he'd start kidding with me and joking with me, I said, I don't know, Jimmy. I said, I don't know if I'm going to answer your question or not, being as Terry Francona was your favorite manager. I don't know about that.
And he always gives me trouble about that.
Every time I got a chance, I threw that at him.
When you came aboard as the manager, I actually broke that story. That he was going to be the manager. The Phillies were trying to keep it quiet, so because they were going to have a big press conference. So you know, I'm working the phones, working my sources, trying to find out who's going to be the next manager of the Phillies, and I'm hearing, you know, it's probably going to be Charlie, but I don't have it ironclad. You got to have it ironclad before you go to print with it. So Pat Rooney was your agent. Stopped answering his phone. I'm like, okay, this is all adding up. Charlie's going to be the guy. So Charlie in those days was an instructor. And when you come into Philly, I actually knew the hotel you used to like to stay at.
Right.
So as I'm hearing this, I'm like 99% sure. I got it to the goal line. I just need to punch it over. I pick up the phone. I call that hotel. I said, hey, you get Charlie Manning over there? And they said, one moment, please. And they ring up to the hotel. And you answer the phone and say, hey, Charlie, Jim Salisbury here. He goes, Jimmy, I'm not sure I'm supposed to be talking to you right now. And I said, I think I got it.
They're not just familiar faces, they're your friends and neighbors. It's their small businesses, a beating heart that makes a neighborhood a home, where personality is served on a plate and imagination paints a brighter world. A place where fresh is always in stock with a personal touch passed down through generations. Support small and make a big difference. Make it local. Make it Main Street. Make it Montco.
You know, Jim, we're talking about your career and everything, and you did spend 1 year with the Yankees, right?
I covered the Yankees in 1996, pretty great year. I'd covered the Phillies for a while, went up there to cover the Yankees for the New York Post for 1 year, ended up coming back to Philadelphia after that year, but it was a really memorable year. And I remember starting off covering that team, and they trained in Tampa, and I had been in Clearwater with the Phillies, and they had a kid in camp with the Yankees that year who was out of options. He was a pitcher. He had come back from some surgeries. They weren't really sure if he was a reliever or a starter. They weren't really sure what to do with him. His name was Mariano Rivera. So you know, I remember him going over to Clearwater one day, and I was covering the Yankees, and it was a B game or a split squad game, and I had gone over there to watch him pitch, and he just absolutely lit up the Phillies. 4 shutout innings, but it was the '96 Phillies. They weren't real good. They were rebuilding. So I wrote that, you know, Mariano Rivera was impressive yesterday, but bear in mind it was against the Phillies. Took a little jab. So Fregosi you were the third base coach. Fregosi sees the story. And a couple nights later, the Phillies come over to Tampa, and I walk by the dugout to say, "Hey, how you doing?" And he doesn't want any part of me.
Jimmy didn't?
No, he is angling for me because of what I wrote, and he's going to dump on me. And he just starts on me. And this guy walks by, and he's kind of, here's Fregosi giving me the business, and he says, "Take it like a man, bleep." And he walks away.
I do remember that.
But that was
I
quite
could hear Fregosi getting on.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
you know what? Fregosi, you knew when Fregosi was mad, believe me. First of all, his lip would start
Yeah, he had all that
quivering,
going.
and so you knew when he was.
Fregosi was loud.
Oh, it was a lot of fun. But that was a great year, just getting to see, you know, a different team for a while. The Yankees. I mean, that was Derek Jeter's rookie year. And you talk about earlier, we talked about getting to watch greatness every night.
Right.
Watching greatness at the beginning was really special. Watching him before he became Derek Jeter. I mean, you know, nowadays he runs the Marlins, and he's a Hall of Famer, and he's very guarded. In those days, he was just kind of a kid. And I remember speaking with him once. I talked earlier about getting to know guys as people, and I was talking to him about his upbringing, and I said, you know, I'd like to talk to your dad. And he says, oh, here's his number, give him a call. So I called his dad on the phone. He's telling me stories about Derek as a kid and great stuff. And, you know, before I'm about to hang up, Derek Jeter's father says, hey, his mom wants to talk to you. So she gets on the phone, and she's telling me about Derek playing shortstop in the month of May of '96. For Doc Gooden's no-hitter. Doc Gooden threw a no-hitter. And Jeter was the shortstop, and she said it was mind-blowing because all I could do was remember Derek when he was a kid. Every night he'd come into our bedroom and imitate Dwight Gooden's pitching motion in front of our full-length mirror, and now he's playing shortstop behind him. Wow. So when you can see that those dreams come to fruition, it really makes the job really special. And those stories are priceless.
It's good, great story. Good story.
Hey, you know, you're a pretty good judge of talent. You've seen a lot. Is there anybody that you watched originally coming up, and you went, in your own mind, you went, this guy, no way this guy's going to play, and he ends up being a pretty good baseball player? There's
probably, but you know, I remember it's probably more the opposite, that when you see a guy in the beginning, like I remember seeing Utley play in AAA.
He wasn't very good at infielder.
He had skipped AA. I watched him play third base up in Scranton one night. I think he made 27 errors that year. Right. And you know, I remember talking to him about defense over the years, and him admitting that, you know, he was a shortstop in high school, tried to play a little shortstop at UCLA, and he flat out said the throw gave him trouble. That's how he ended up at second base. And you know, I thought he made himself a great second baseman. You could still, he was a little mechanical, and you could see, but he made everything. But I don't know, I'd have to think if there was one guy that we thought was, you know, not going to be good and became great. There probably is, but more so like when Rollins arrived, I thought you knew he was going to be great. He had a flair from the dramatic, for the dramatic, right from the beginning. But this, just watching some of these guys over the years has been awesome.
When he brings up Utley, if you stop and think, you know, like all the times I was around Utley, you know, like he did work on his defense. He was a big time guy that went out there every day and worked on his defense.
Oh, every day.
And also, you know, you remember when he had the throwing thing?
Yeah.
And that happened with the Dodgers when he was playing in Dodger Stadium, and his throwing got kind of bad at second base. And actually, you know, when he come across the bag, he was positioned to throw the ball, you know, up between home plate and the dugout. Really, he wouldn't square it up, And I never told him anything. I never said nothing to him about it. But Jimmy and them used to ask me about it, and I said, he'll be all right, he'll be all right. And they would ask me, have you said anything to him about it? And I said, no, I haven't. And I remember him asking me why. I said, I don't have to because he's going to correct it. And he did correct it.
Yeah, he did.
Now listen, when he corrected, he came in there and he asked me one day, he said, how come you didn't say something to me about it, Chuck? I said, I knew I didn't have to say anything about it. I knew you was throwing the ball away. And I said, I figured that if anybody was going to correct it, it was going to be you.
That's good.
And that shows how mentally tough he was.
Yeah.
Because you both know, when you get the yips, or when it's
especially
just,
here,
it can weigh on your mind. It can only get worse.
Right.
And he nipped it in the bud.
Right.
Well, you know what? We could sit here for another whole show, but we're going to have to wrap this up. And,
Why?
You know, we only get so much time. You know, Chuck and I, we're on a scale here, half hour, and you're done.
I watch your show. It's really good. It's my new favorite show.
Well, we want to thank you for coming, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, guys.
They just never seem to run out of stories. Before we wrap things up, we want to thank the great staff here at the Gatehouse at the Navy Yard for their great hospitality today. For Charlie and Larry, I'm Sam Wilson, and we'll catch you down the line. Down the Line is brought to you in part by the Valley Forge Tourism and Convention Board. Visit Montgomery County's main streets. Find out more at makeitmainstreets.com. By Shibe Vintage Sports, where there's a story in every stitch. Check out their throwback sports gear at their Center City location or at shibesports.com. And by Phillies Nation, where informed fans go for news, rumors, events, and other fun stuff.